Well, hi, folks. Online safety. We're all online, of course, on a system called Zoom, which has an encryption number of 4, which is not ideal in terms of digits, or 6, because the total number of passwords is 1 million, which means that in a few minutes, someone running a digital spreadsheet can break the password and enter and drop porn on the site if they have access to share screen, which of course no one else has except the panelists. So that's a good thing. But as you can see, I mean, part of working on online and digital is that as soon as we have an application, we also have an opportunity to hack the application. I can see a number of people on the call are involved in this world of either data gathering, and Mr. Otto's on, I think, if I'm correct, you data gatherer. And there are others here that are proficient in expertise in digital. So I'm very pleased to see that too. My name's Des Latham, and I train governments and corporates and journalists around the world in how to avoid becoming a victim of their own laziness, I guess is the way to put it. The thing about digital systems is that they are very easy to access and they all look very simple. But the problem about using systems that are digital is that the world is connected, and that the internet research agency in Leningrad, for example, can hack you or me right now if they feel like it by just clicking a few buttons. The FSA in the US, or our own security here in South Africa or beyond in Southern Africa, generally can access us at any time. If you pay the right money to the NSO of Israel, they will hack your WhatsApp account if you are a protester in Mozambique. And if you are really unlucky, you'll find a knock on the door, as is happening in Rwanda and Tanzania, for example. Or if you're extraordinarily unlucky, you'll have your head cut off by the Saudi Arabians via the application called Pegasus, which tracked WhatsApp and other data that's being used by Khashoggi, for example. So, you know, when we come to think about online safety, we start at various levels. So I just wanted to pitch this and say to folks out there that we're going to take this in a number of stages. We only have an hour. And what I'm going to do is just run partly death by PowerPoint, as I said to Chebo, who's helping me here. There's a lot of slides that I've got here. It's an 80-slide thing, but I'm not going to go through each one, obviously. The slides feature some help files about how to partition drives, protect your data. But as you'll see from the presentation, some of it gets quite deep, and by the end of it, we're talking about the deep web, and under that is the dark web. And we are looking at building an entire false identity on the web, which has ethical questions around it. And as we go through this, you're going to have to decide for yourselves how much of this is going to be useful for you in the future. It is weaponizing the internet, some of what I'm going to show you, because the internet is weaponized. So it's a bit like being in an arms race when you're in the job that I do. When entire cities are being shut down by malware or ransomware, and hospitals are shut and people are dying because the systems don't work, as happened in Germany last week. This is not a playtime. So I wanted to just pitch that straight up front and say, if you're expecting me to talk about how to what to say on Twitter and go over the detail, no, this is going to look quite deeply into systems, but also it's technical at times. But I'm going to also take advantage of the fact that there's only an hour. So with that said, I'm just going to share the screen. So give me a second while I just click a few buttons here, and I presume you're all seeing the online security, and I'm just going to go and put it on and get rid of myself to reduce the data usage, which I'm afraid, because we're all remoting these days, I've got 2 data lines here, plus mobile as a backup. And this morning I had a 2-hour session with management, and we had a few crashes. So bear with me if that happens at this point. Okay, so how to protect your data and yourself. Now, obviously, there are things like face recognition, which are being built right now, and there are deep questions around who is building what for whom. The biggest examples of these, obviously, are in China at the moment, because there's a rush to identify threats, and the easiest way to do that is to track people by their digital product that they're carrying around with them, as well as themselves, becoming themselves. So if you're going to get involved in tracking how many Uyghurs are in prison, which is over 1 million apparently, in concentration camps, if you want to call them that, in the west of China, you, as a journalist, will not get anywhere near that at the moment in that part of the region, because of a number of ways in which surveillance is taking place around the world. So, I mean, one of the things you've got to understand here is that gone is the day when you could say that it's, you know, the US system or the Chinese system or the Australian system or the Israeli system or the South African system. These countries are buying and selling in really strange ways that is not impacted by obvious geopolitical interests. So, for example, American companies are selling products to Russians at times, and Israelis who are selling products to Saudi Arabians at times, and they used to be heinous enemies of each other, you know, intractable. So there were quite interesting things have happened. It's a bit like observing 1984 in real time. In a way, but there's also limitation on this. So because we recognize threats as journalists, there's the AI and drone tech, for example. Everyone is a drone tech aficionado now, I hope. I'm a drone pilot. I have a license. And one of the things that I use is a DJI drone called a Mavic. It's a little thing that I carry on in a bag. And when security see it, they just ignore it. It looks like a toy, but it shoots in 4K. And you can fly, if you hack it, you can fly up 2,000 feet and so on. And if you put a big enough aerial on your car using it, you can fly 13 kilometers and it goes at 65 kilometers an hour. So that's quite a piece of machine if you want to fly it into someone's car. Or into someone's house or into their head, if they happen to be, you know, somebody like walking along a cliff face. So these things are now out there and they're exploited by people like the internet when it started back in the early 90s properly. The access to freedom also comes with a exploitation of freedom, and things like drones, AI, and surveillance now is easy to find, easy to access. So, for example, Android users with a shock, this has been fixed now earlier this year, and the end of last year, certain devices, phones running Androids, found out that Mavic and DJI products were accessing on the certain kind of application the entire phone by Chinese developers. Now, this has been fixed in Android once Android found out, or Google found out about it. But you can see that as people take steps to incorporate digital into their world, such as Internet of Things, the dangers about what takes place emerge because of a knowledge or lack of knowledge. So I started with a little thing called Password 101, which for you out there who are highly experienced, you may roll your eyes, but there's a lot of debate around this. And the reason why I do this is because that's the biggest problem in hacking and phishing attacks that are taking place right now in corporates, is that the IT manager or the person who manages the internet has a weak password, or B, they are sent mails by blonde Russians who they think are really beautiful and start talking to them and tell them their entire life story. And meanwhile, it's like a really fat, ugly, pimply man sitting somewhere in Odessa or in Leningrad or maybe even San Francisco, and is trying to find as much as possible about the people who manage the systems, and then they just start trying to hack the password. So running sorry, the helicopter going really low overhead. So running a password system, you can get a tool. We all know them now. You start typing into any of the applications and they say, would you like to use my password? And it looks very good and it's very protected and it's in the cloud and it looks fine and so on. Of course, you can go that route and it's much safer than putting in coffee 185 or whatever it is that you're using. But the big thing about passwords, the trick really is it should be a phrase where you can, and it should be in multiple languages. I speak isiZulu and isiXhosa, so what I do is I do my password in multiple languages, and no one, believe me, is going to hack that. Yes, they may download the spreadsheet with my password in it, the Excel file or the CVS, and then they will hack everyone on that, such as credit card robberies and theft. But if you have a phrase that you use that is particular to you and you can remember, you can use a number of these phrases and then just convert the vowels to numbers, which is easy. So Granny loves purple turns into GR4NNYL, 0 as in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 0 numeric, and then V and then 3 SPUP. You obviously, if you know that phrase and you put it into your password and someone tries to, and your name is David Smith or Humphrey Ndlovu, and someone comes to you and says, oh, tries to chat you up, find out about you, and you tell them that your son's name is Jonathan and your daughter's name is Carol, and so on. They start trying to hack you based on your birth date. No one is going to get into the phrase that you have, unless you constantly use it. God is great, or something like that, or the fat dog jump. Yes.
Can I just interrupt you there? Your slide is not moving unless you're still on the first slide.
I'm still on password 101.
Which is the first page?
It says password 101.
No, we are seeing online security.
Oh,
how to
heavens.
protect your data.
Okay, let me
and
go
your
out of
stuff.
that. Then all my funky tricks are going to disappear, folks. Sorry about that.
There we go.
So,
Thank you.
all right. So we password 101. Well, that's good. We haven't dealt with anything really serious yet, except for a couple of pictures here where I show you the actual application and where it was picked up by Google. So let me stick to that. I did have issues with this before, so thanks, Chipper, for helping me there. So here we go. So Granny loves purple, and then you just add numbers, and the easiest thing to do is to go 3, 4, 5. And people say, "Oh no, that's bad," because it's in order. But then you hold shift and you do it in reverse, and you use these kind of tricks. So numbers are useful to use as vowels and a phrase. Very hard to hack that. The only problem is remember which keyboard you're using, because if you're going to hold shift down and go 1, 2, 3 on a UK keyboard, you're going to get a pound sign and not a hashtag. So clearly, you must need to make sure that whatever computer you're using, you need to understand the keyboard that you're using. So let's look at the African experience. Now, we are no different to anywhere else in the world, really. The only thing that needs to be said is I'm going to go through some of the examples of stuff that's been going on in the last, say, 3 years around Africa in terms of the involvement. And this is not an attack on Chinese nationals or American nationals or Israeli nationals or anything. It's just facts that I'm going to present to you. And if you want to check them, you can go and check them out yourself. You get copies of the slide, all those that are present on this call. So there's been examples where Chinese, Israeli, and Australian cyber companies are working in Africa quite closely with some governments that are oppressive. And, everyone needs to make a buck, I guess. But who's going to find out is the second thing. Now, what these companies are doing, as we'll see, is they're saying, no, we don't sell to individuals, only proper governments. And of course, you're all at the UN, aren't you? So it's very hard to oppose these folks. I mean, after all, Saudi Arabia just missed going on to the Human Rights Council of the UN. China and Russia are on it. Meanwhile, there's 1 million Uyghurs sitting in concentration camps. So you can see how the nature of the beast has developed over the last 5 years. We've gone from an online experience of freedom and the luxury of thinking we have a revolution that's going to change the world. And unfortunately, now the revolution is not going according to plan. Ask the people who are retweeting Trump, for example. So the big thing here that we're going to look at in conjunction with this quick touchdown on some of the African experience is I want to just remind everyone on the call that there are things that concern me when I'm working with organizations at the moment. The first is the perception that if you do this stuff, it slows down processes and reporting. So if you get involved in this world of being aware of online security and taking action, management don't understand it fully. So they've just got used to the idea of telling their reporters, now you must file from the field. And now you're telling them they need to slow down on attribution stuff and be sure about the kind of material they're getting. It kind of confuses, especially middle management who are notorious for being slow thinkers. The second thing is security by obscurity, which is people think, oh, I'm just little old Des Latham living in Johannesburg. Who's going to worry about me? Meanwhile, because of COVID, we are being hammered on our email accounts at levels that have never been seen before by malware and phishers who are looking for your credit card details. So you're not as obscure as you think. Thirdly, and also, $200 is $200, folks. And thirdly, geographic location. Here I am at the tip of Africa. I'm like 12 hours flight away from the big wild world of the EU, 24 hours or 14, depending on what flight you take to the US. Who's going to be interested in me? Well, they are interested in you because, again, it's a combination of oppressive tactics, surveillance by the nation state, and bad people who now can access you. And I'm going to show you some of the apps later on in the presentation where you can actually go to Facebook and you can download for free an entire app that'll help you create spam mails, which are now being offered on Facebook. Thank you very much, Mark. Then, of course, there's ease of use, which is people are so lazy about this. They got their WhatsApp account and then, they think, okay, because I don't fully understand how it works, it's going to be hard for someone else to hack and crack me. And that's the worst thing to do because it's the ease of use that causes trouble. With digital comes speed, and with speed comes the need to break. So when you get an email, which I'm going to show you in a minute, that doesn't look right, most people click on it because it's an email after all. I think it's changing a little in the last few years. We all laugh about the 419, the attacks from mainly West Africa, where we'd receive 419 documents saying, I'm commander-in-chief of the Royal Guard, and I've been given $200,000, and I'd like to use the processor, and so on. Those kind of things are so clumsy. The phishers and malware and attackers now that are using really, really advanced methods. So if we get used to using and clicking and speed, and emails is notorious for this, I'm going to show you how the majority of attacks are coming through emails. Then we've got to identify the threats. So the NSO group of Israel is probably one of the most advanced when it comes to monitoring social media accounts. They're working with a number of governments. Now, what I'm going to tell you here has not been confirmed 100%, but all the signs are, and you know, as investigative journalists, you have a hypothesis and you back it up with some proof. There's some proof that, for example, they were involved in the tracking of Khashoggi. They were involved, for example, in the tracking of Joaquin Guzman, El Chapo, on behalf of the American and the Mexican government. So you'd think, oh, well, that guy was selling cocaine to the world. Good for them. They nailed him. The NSO group helped nail the bad person. But they also have been involved in targeting Moroccan activists this year. In fact, the last few months. So this is an entity that's linked to the Israeli Ministry of Defense, and it exports this weaponized product and certain relationships and with a certain contract to governments, but never private entities. So we're looking at a long list of countries here. It's Turkey, Thailand, Uzbekistan, Mozambique, Yemen, Saudi Arabia, Nigeria, Bahrain, and they've been lurking around in South Africa recently too. So you can see that it's a lot of money to be made tracking people like you and me, because, you know, we have information, and information is power, and it leads to the collapse of government, or it leads to arrests eventually. Look at the Panama Papers, for example. So what are we looking at here? We're looking at a situation where there's a group of people in many Nordic countries started this called Elves, and what they do is they fight off the trolls, and the trolls, we know who the trolls are. The trolls are bad people around the world who are trolling us. So but at first it looks like a quaint little concept, except the Gerasimov doctrine, which came out in 2013, which was Russia's proactive attempt to deal with the growing sign of the internet. Now, of course, there's no independent internet providers in Russia or China or Egypt. There are only 8 or 9 of them in Nigeria, for example, whereas there are many, many in South Africa. And so any country that has only one internet provider linked to the states is a danger. If you don't understand that, or you don't agree with that, I accept that, because you like the idea of a single, state operator on a monopoly for whatever political reasons you have. But as a thinking journalist, you've got to realize that as soon as any company registered in China is a digital company, such as Huawei operates, or TikTok, they definitely are running through military industrial complex servers there. And because of saying that, you need to be aware that this is not a positive development when it comes to the freedom of information. So there's a lot of fighting going on in the backyards of digital in the dark web between the elves and the trolls. The troll farms, and this is a phrase that everyone likes to use. There are literally dozens and sometimes hundreds of people that are skewing social media. The Group 40, for example, in Mozambique is well known, has been published about, and the number of these entities that are hired by governments to tweak, if you like, or to warp conversations on social media. So they use a hashtag and then they change the conversation. Now, of course, the right in America and the left, Antifa, as well as the Proud Boys of the US, are using this principle right now. So what do we do about it as journalists? So one of the things that's really interesting today, for example, in New York Times was discussing this, along with other journalists around the country. Should they even report on some of the disinformation campaigns, because they're growing the validity of this disinformation? So we're in the midst of quite an interesting period here with the US elections coming up. But for us as general users, the idea that internet research is linked to nation states is not new. This is a story from September this year, for example. Fake left-wing news outlet with fictional editors, says Facebook. So these levels and layers of attacks are growing in depth. And that's what's interesting me, is that as this happens, the complexities of the people that want our information, or actually want to switch your camera on while you're traveling in your own car, have billions of dollars to spend to do this, and they're backed up by nation states. So the Internet Research Agencies, or the BEARS as they're called as well, the IRA, which is of course an even more curious acronym, but this is a well-known entity that is proven to operate inside Leningrad, and what it's proficient at, and has been, is trying to tweak false information and misinformation, as well as disinformation, if you like, all of it, on Facebook and other social media. Facebook in particular has been useful for people in Myanmar when it comes to the Rohingya, because you can put just about anything on there, and Facebook, of course, has up until only the last few weeks has been saying, not our problem. We are just a platform. We're not a publisher, so we don't have to worry that New Zealand an Australian fascist with an automatic weapon killed 52 Muslims, which I think is really disingenuous, of course. And all of us on this call, I really believe that emphatically. So here's the tension: we have freedoms, but we are being engulfed by people who are abusing our global freedoms. Huawei is an example of this. Now, Huawei's got great phones and they're nice people, etc., etc. But you must understand that they have built surveillance systems in Africa on behalf of governments. This is proven from Grey Dynamics and other investigative sites, digital sites. Go and check it out if you don't believe it. But there's quite a confluence of action between the 5G building of the networks, which is on the right, the orange map, and on the left, which is building surveillance. Yeah, Huawei are working on surveillance in South Africa. What's the problem? I've got a Huawei modem in my house that I'm sure following this presentation, if someone cares about it, would be able to get into. And what are they going to find? Not much, I hope. But you can see how there's definitely a sign that there's a link between the building of networks, development of relationship and business terms, and then surveillance. So Huawei in Uganda is well known from last year. Ruling party was monitored. A highly expensive CCTV system was installed at high cost. And of course, the TV system works with AI. The AI is built into that. And Uganda, as we all know, is not the shining light of democracy in Northeast Africa. So it's not clear, though, if the Huawei officials working with Ugandans, and 6 individuals were named there, by the way, and as well as Zambia, I'll get to in a minute, where the snooping was done with the knowledge of Huawei execs back home in Shanghai or Beijing. I mean, of course, they could say, no, we know nothing about this. It's just local people going rogue. But of course, that's a highly naive position to take in a sharp-pointed world. In Kenya, for example, 1,800 HD cameras have been put into Nairobi mainly, and has been used for traffic mainly, but also it's been used with AI in the background to identify possible suspects. And so it's legal, right? It's a legal government, it's a legal country, it's got democracy. So what's the problem? You'd say, I don't care. You're just implying that there's an issue because so many cameras are there. No, I'm saying you just got to watch the cameras watching you. That's all. And being aware that they're there. When you go downtown in Johannesburg, you all know where the cameras are. You can look up and see them. And believe me, the criminals know where they are too. Huawei technicians, this is reported in Dow Jones and also in Wall Street Journal. Allegedly, this has not been proven because no one's accepted inside Zambia that it actually happened. But again, hypothesis, attribution, go check. Helped cybersecurity force to track opponents of the government in Lusaka. Okay, so CloudWalk, which is a system built by, I think, Australians, is working in Zimbabwe. And the big problem with CloudWalk, it has American technology built into it, is that they became highly expert in identifying black faces. So you can start seeing that there's a bit of a problem. They're not saying this publicly. Apologies. Hold on, my dog is having a fit at the children next door. Apologies about that. So now you know I have a dog and I have children next door. So the same system was installed in Xinjiang, for example, to monitor Uyghur Muslims. So these are nasty little bits of technology. Email is good. Email is bad. Cameras are good. Cameras are bad. So what do we do about it as journalists? What we cannot do is what Joe Soap out there is doing, which is say, I don't care. I'm not verifying the picture. And I don't care who's monitoring me because at least I get noticed. I'm like 22. I have nothing. Someone out there is noticing me and giving me free internet for being noticed. And I'm like, thank you very much. But of course, as you start investigating arms dealers and drug dealers, etc., this becomes a bit of a problem. So we all know as investigative journalists, I'm sure you've already had presentations about this in the last few days. The first security wall we use is the obvious one, such as something called Secure Drop. You register on the site as an organization and you get given access to free tools and support, and it is encrypted. But it's on the internet. But it's encrypted. But it's on the internet. Okay, so there's the tension of the entire presentation. So the first part of this is looking at saying to ourselves, okay, because we know that, and we are now dealing, as I did with a few years ago, investigating money laundering and gold, and the mafia was involved. There's a number of mafia in South Africa that still exists, believe it or not, and people are not happy with that. It's a really dangerous situation. So what was I going to use to monitor materials? And back in the day when I was doing some of that, it was pre-internet, but they definitely were monitoring my phone. So we have to understand that and then take decisions. So the second wall is action. So the first wall about it is use the existing apps. And we're going to go through a few of them now. So the first wall is the applications that exist. If you're not using them, you must use them, especially as investigative journalists. But remember, it's not because it's not going to be easy for you. It's not easy to use these applications. Sometimes you have to upload freeware and then change your operating system to Linux, or you have to then partition a drive and do something on it. So these are not easy things. So people then, what they tend to do is hire someone to do it for them as journalists. And as a journalist, I've always found that's a big mistake. If you don't physically do it yourself, how are you going to understand exactly how it works? So buying quality support is all good and well, but eventually it has to percolate through the entire organization. And that is the second wall, which is action. So you enhance interest in security by making it personal. If you haven't done this, check your own location history on Google. I'm going to show you how to do that in a minute. If you don't know, it's about protecting your source. And that's the first port of call, surely, isn't it? And so the source says, I'm going to send you a file. And you say, no, don't send it to me. I'm going to meet you. Give me a printout. So it's off digital entirely. You adopt secure mannerisms as the world is changing. I had a friend, unfortunately passed away recently, who used to be on a radio show and say to people, well, he's going at the end of the show, he's going off to have lunch at Doppio, and he was hijacked twice for his BMW convertible. He was saying that on Twitter, by the way. And we had a discussion. I said to him, you've got to stop telling people where you are and when you're going to and where you're going. You're a public figure. There's some things you do publicly, other things you do not. And I think we've understood that now. Then you must improve individual personal action by doing it yourself. All those on the call. And as I said, I could see a couple of real experts here now. I know we're trying to mentor others into the situation, but who likes to be a techno? You know, everyone laughs about the geek around the corner, but really we all have to be the geeks around the corner. Then, of course, take advice from the experts. And the big things with workflows by integrating digital security plans is you need to question everything that you're doing, and then you need to mentor your staff constantly to do it. And it's a collective issue. It's not individual. And the big thing here too is you're sharing intelligence about the threat with competitors, about the threat that you have with your competitors. That's the unusual one. As investigative journalists, we know that the biggest protection from being shot by the arms dealer or strangled is that you share, once you have the information, you share it with competitors and you flood the market with it if you really want to do it properly, because then you and your competitors survive. And that's the contradiction, because journalists love to say, I broke the story and now I'm going to get the Knight Fellowship or the Nieman Fellowship. So they tend to be their own worst enemies when it comes to some of these things by not understanding fully how sharing information with competitors saves your life. Then, of course, adopt tier systems. So not everyone needs to be in the need to know situation, and particularly around passwords. And then have a lawyer available. So these are all standards, right? Okay. Second wall, we all, especially the experienced people on this call, you are fully aware of what that means. Then the third wall is accountability. So the all staff in your organization, you have to order them to activate two-factor authentication of every account they've got. Every phone, every Facebook, everything they've got, two-factor authentication. We have it in our banking system. You should have it on everything. I have it on every account I have. There's no account I have that does not has two-factor authentication. That really matters. The other little stuff where I log into somewhere and it's no credit card, it's just me logging into something. I take a view about that. But guess what? It slows you down. And that's the part I was showing you earlier about this situation slows you down. This little red block here. Yes, it slows you down. So slow down. Start thinking. Train journalists to spot phishing attacks. I'm still horrified by people who are my age, 58, and who keep clicking on emails because it just looks fine. And you've got to train these people to go, of all ages, to go, look, don't open any email that you didn't expect to get. It's very simple. You can't win a lottery you didn't enter. You know, these are very simple ideas. When people kind of fall over themselves because of greed or just they're not thinking, they clicking. Then you need to have a threat model to monitor high-risk individuals in the organization, IT, finance, CEO, investigative journalist. I'm stating the obvious here, but you'll be surprised how many media entities I've worked with over the years that don't do that because the editor in charge is really completely clueless about how digital works. So they don't think, they are as confused as the next, and they think, oh, we'll hire someone to do it for us. And they don't, they run their own Twitter feed with a password that says name and a number or whatever it is. So, and then identify security champions in your place of work. And hopefully everyone on the call are security champions. That's why we're thinking about it. And then mentor people around you. When they do stuff, you've got to bring them up and say, yeah, but don't open that email, and be the port of call. So what I do when I'm in full-time employment at agencies or organizations, I've been in government, as I said, and corporate and media houses, is I say to them, if you're not sure, just contact me. I'll reply. If it's, in reasonable hour, say between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. So you become your own support internally. And then you need a digital security specialist to back you up on some of the things, and manage your passwords carefully, reduce information that you've got online. The point G here, with reducing information side, is something that I've been trying to manage through different entities worldwide, and I've found that people consistently make the same mistake about this. They come from a junior kind of position. They come from a place where they've got used to using Twitter and Facebook in a certain way, and TikTok now and Instagram, and they think that just talking about what you feel about online at certain times and places is telling your friends about the world, and it's not. It's giving information to people who don't like you about what you're doing. It's very simple. So out of the 99 people or 100, 99 are fine, but it's that one person who thinks, oh, thank you very much, you're not at home, and goes and ransacks your house. Because you just said you're going out, or you're going to meet your friends, or hey, here I am, selfie somewhere out there. So journalists really have to rethink entirely what they're doing with this game. And it's not a fear-mongering thing I'm talking to you about here. We're talking about a changed world, particularly since 2008-9. We're talking about growing signs of conflict in the world, geopolitical conflict, and nation states are now actively involved in trying to reduce the amount of valuable information that is valid, that's moving around in the marketplace. So because of that, you and I as journalists are targets, whether you like it or not. If you're talking about lifestyle or you're talking about the Guptas, you are targets. And the people who don't like you and me are the usual suspects. So because of that, you've got to start outthinking them. And outthinking them means you don't tell them stuff. Like, you're not going to, you're in a chair and they've tied you to the chair with a light in your eyes and they say, tell me your father's name. And it's, you keep using it online. Next minute, someone attacks your parents because you've been doing stories. It's very easy for these folks to get the information. If you reduce the information, they have to go looking for it. And then when they go looking for it, the alarm bells tend to go off, right? Like back in the day. Someone, oh, did you hear so-and-so? Do you know this guy? He phoned me and asked some questions. That kind of thing starts happening. So you reduce the information online, and that's counterintuitive because our job is journalism, isn't it? Then you integrate Signal or something like that into your daily life. So that's the first section. I'm going to now, just give me a second while I boot the rabble behind me outside, and we can take questions, and Chipu said he'd help convert them. So just give me a moment while I deal with the noise going on behind me here. So sorry, just give me a sec. Okay, thanks for your patience. I'm going to stop the share and just see if there's any questions. Chipper, anyone got any questions? None. Okay, good. Because we need to rock and roll.
Yeah, you can continue.
Great, excellent, thank you. So we're into malware. Now, so this is now becoming a major problem, and these people are becoming very, very aggressive and quite clever. So I'm sure all of you have got something like this. It says, I guess you're wondering why you're receiving this email. I placed a malware on an adult website, porn, and you visited and watched the video, your device has been affected, blah, 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 blah. So I had a staffer last week saying, I never watch porn. I said, well, have they shared a picture of you on this email? Have they said something specific about you? No. It's a typical malware attack. They've got your email address because it's online probably, and they've sent you this thing, and they're trying to freak you out because they're taking a chance. They're thinking that X% of the world uses porn online, and so it's highly likely that you've been doing it, so they send you this generic message. You'd be surprised how many people think this is real and panic, which is interesting. Then Bitcoin's use has ratcheted up in the last year around sextortion. So sextortionists used to demand around $150,000 for Bitcoin. Send me Bitcoin, I'll take the pictures of you naked offline. And now they've gone down to 17,000. Why? Supply and demand. There's a huge number of people out there now doing this, and they're going in broader and broader fields. So in other words, they're hitting you and me. It's like the criminals who used to just do the pick and pay robberies are now, and the cash in transit are now rocking up at your front door and taking money from you. But obviously they can't take $150,000 because we don't have it. So what are they doing? They are broadening their attacks on us using the internet as the launch vehicle of choice. And this is proven from the way in which sextortion campaigns and the growth in Bitcoin of certain file types and certain amounts is grown. There are certain dangerous file types, and specifically, if you use a PC, I'm sorry for you, you are under attack constantly. I mean, the malicious attachment types, this comes from Talos Intelligence, by the way, and I'm going to share a file with Chepo afterwards you can share with you, which is a little handbook where I got some of the stuff from. It's really useful. But if you're using an Office product, get ready for trouble. Now, I know I'm preaching to converted here. Okay? I know everyone out there who's got a PC or an Android phone and uses Office has been hammered, because that's what the guys are using to hammer you. The nearly 43% of malicious attachment types are aimed at Office products. 42% of those are aimed at the .doc extension. Nearly over 26% is aimed at .zip. The archive products in terms of attachment types, as well as script. PDFs, we know PDFs, around 10% of malicious attacks come through PDFs. There's some dangers, thanks very much to Adobe, there's some dangers in how PDFs work. Now Adobe is in a big war with these people trying to stop it, like all the other suppliers of especially cloud products. But these are weaponized nation states we're talking about here. Very hard to compete, even as a large company, with some of these guys. Don't worry too much about the other things, but the thing I want to show you is that the files that exist there, the .exe, which used to be the big malicious extension, no longer is as big, because most email systems block EXEs, executable files, which means it's an application that's going to run when you click on it. The exe does not run on Apple, for example, but Apples do open .doc. So if you're clever enough to get around the emails protection system and the kind of slightly lazy journalist on the other side clicks on the .doc, there's a high chance that .doc pulls in malware or some kind of tracking software onto your Mac. So that's how it's happening most of the time, not through systems. So these are examples of expert phishing products. If you look on the left, it looks exactly like a Microsoft 365 account, right? Looks exactly. Not like the old days. On the right, this is another example of a phishing attack or malware attempt. You can see that these guys have got really good at not looking as amateur as they used to. There's also something called the Gamut botnet, which works through dating and intimate relations spam. So each time you go on that site, it could be Media24, it could be Reuters, whatever it is, that says, woman who over the age of 40 looking for men in Johannesburg, and you think, oh, let me have a little click on that. Inside the systems that run these are some of them are bots that are specially identifying you as a possible purchaser of their malware or their phishing tool, and they are then going to email you at some point because you're putting in your details in some of these applications. So they're piggybacking like bad pilot fish on a shark on these systems, piggybacking on poorly run internet servers, and then they send you this kind of stuff that says, hey, buy something. And these days, what is it? They're sending you stuff for pharmaceuticals and PPE because, of course, we're all dying of COVID. So we're talking about quite complex, fast-moving folks. And here is the Hack API, which is available as a specialized malware phishing spam toolkit. If you go into Facebook and you look hard enough, you'll find this. You can get this downloaded into your own computer, and you can run your own spam system from your own computer. In fact, it even helps you deploy false DNS, which is false server information. It's quite easy to track this if you know what you're doing, but most people and most systems don't have the time for it. Remember the time thing I've mentioned a couple of times. So this is an example of the kind of phishing that we all get. There's standard bank, but it's not. If you put the email address into your browser, the browser says, hold on a second, most of them, particularly Firefox at the moment, it'll say, hold on, because it recognizes this as a danger. When you get that note about, is this this site, do you want to go to? When you get that kind of note, you're about to log into site, maybe attempt to trick you. Do not go. All right. Don't click on it. Try and teach everyone around you. Yes, take the chance. Some of it's fine, but you don't want to take the chance. It's a bit like saying, go into the minefield and there's a mine. It's fine. Pick it up. You know, you're not mad. You'll say, no, I don't think so. It may be fine, but I'm not going to take the chance. And that's the same logic with this. So if I checked on a certain system on the Mac, which I'm going to just jump because we're going to run out of time, you can test where the actual email comes from using raw source. And if they're really amateurs, which these people were, they have it came from a different return path. In other words, I figured out it's sent from a false server. And, you know, that's a very quick job. I haven't clicked on anything in the email. I haven't downloaded anything into my own computer yet, and I've checked the same thing on PCs. There's something called the message header analyzer, which you can do, and I've got a help file, a set of help files to help you there if you're interested in this. But my advice to you is, if you get an email you didn't expect, delete it. Don't open it. And that's a problem for email marketing, isn't it? Because that's what everyone's doing these days. In fact, I attended the Online News Association last year, and the big app of the moment, guess what it was? It was called newsletters, which is like going back 20 years. And so half the business models of the world around some of the publishers, they're pursuing this newsletter marketplace. And at the same time, phishers know this, what I'm telling you. So they spoof these newsletters, and you think, oh, there's my newsletter from Dow Jones. And you click on it, and the next minute you've got a bit of malware on your computer. So there's a little help file with 6 things to check. I'm going to jump the system on setting up VPNs. VPNs these days are a bit of a red flag. You can you get these notes if you want to set them up. Go through different kind of VPN processes as well as different services. But it's a virtual private network. You can pretend you're where you're not. But there are much cleverer ways to do that these days. But VPNs are still used. The problem with people using VPNs, and if you're in the middle class, is you can't use Netflix after that, because Netflix says you've got a VPN and you're trying to bypass their business model. So you know, all these things are changing really rapidly. The second thing that you can do apart from VPNs is hide your data on your own device. And again, I'm going to just tell you that you can do that. The danger here is that if you go through an airport with a nation state that's really fully aware of this, and you've been naughty, talking about them, what they tend to do is grab your piece of hardware and check how big the hard drive is, and suddenly they find there's 200 megabytes missing. And then they know that you're hiding data on the hard drive. So it's a two-phase thing here where yes, if you want to do stuff around the place and you're traveling to general places and you want to hide some of the things, that's fine. But when you go into places like Ethiopia or to China or into the US, and you've been, you know, actively criticizing Trump, and they recognize that you're a danger, whatever it is, you see what I'm saying here, and they open up your devices. If you're really unlikely, they torture you to get your own password, because that's what's going to happen. So the clever thing to do is don't hide your data. Don't take it with you. So that has a problem, because how are we going to then share the spreadsheet of the Panama Papers? How are we going to do that if we are concerned that our data that we're hiding with passwords, I'm just clicking through, so you've got this passwords. How are we then going to deal with the issue that is at hand here, which is that we need, through ease of use, to share quickly a file and a folder on whatever drop system that we're using that's secure, and yet it's still on these machines, right? It's still there, and it's trackable because of that. So I'll show you how to do that. I'll show you on this worksheet, which I hope you use, or you can just go and YouTube yourself and do it yourself. But it's important that we start acting properly around these things. We're in an advanced danger zone now, and it's not like, I'm stressing this, it's not like it was 4 or 5 years ago. Our systems here, everything has changed, and you can't keep doing the same things that you were doing 4 or 5 years ago. You've got to use new techniques. So the big thing is get rid of Google's ability to track you. Just get rid of it. It's very aggressive. Whether you like Google or not, I don't care. If you're a journalist, you cannot, unfortunately, in the process that I show you here, and you can go and do it yourself, you can't delete or you can't tell Google to delete your data daily. It won't allow you to do that. It'll do it every 3 months. But you can tell Google to stop trapping all your web and app activity. For example, me, on my system, I've told Google to lay off. It's not allowed to collect any information about my web browsing habits. It's not allowed to record, which it was doing, any audio. It's not allowed to take any actions on my back end. And I go and check to make sure it's all my plugs are plugged off. And so far, so good. So you can manage yourself and the system every day. The problem is you go and you use Google Maps, then you have to switch on location. But the upside is you can still tell Google that not to track you on a map internationally. Okay, then there's I just want to break for a sec. Are there any questions yet? Okay. Well, if you've got, you can send me confidential questions. What happens generally when I do?
Yeah. There are a couple of questions.
Okay.
With a question from Keegan Leach here. He says, how do we manage cases in which we need to use less secure applications or services?
Good question. Get 2 phones. Make the phone that you're using, make the people that you're talking with use a very basic form of SMS. Get a burner phone. So you have to, you separate yourself and your main device of communication with a secondary device. It's a bit like, how do you meet a dangerous person? Okay, you don't meet them at night in your car in a quiet place. You say, meet me at the mall at 10 a.m. and meet me at the busiest mug and bean, okay? Then when do you get there? You get there at 8. You don't get there at 10. You see what I'm saying? So the same thing applies with protecting and talking to people on mobile devices. You try and use a system where you're going to have to fund some of this because people don't like the data and they want to use WhatsApp. You've got to get off WhatsApp when you start talking about dangerous people. Because they get nailed, they find your conversation on the WhatsApp, or someone screen grabs it, worse, and you get dragged into this world where you thought you were independent and anonymous, and you're not. But you are independent and anonymous largely on a burner device. The way that the crook is going to have to get you on a very basic phone, I'll show you the one that I use. It's a little old Nokia. I take it around Africa with me. It's got a 7-day battery life. It's got SMS and calls. Yes, they can track me using the telco system. They can track me through the towers. But I can't use WhatsApp on this thing. So, so you make your decisions based on that. It's a hard thing to think about. And I know it's Neil, I know that it sounds counterintuitive because everyone wants to use these simple systems because they think it's anonymous, but you and I know they are not. So you've got to then decide, I'm still going to make it a remote situation, but to get to that SMS, someone's going to literally hack Vodacom's server, or they have to go to the police, get a judge to confirm it, or a magistrate. Then they've got to go into Vodacom. And you see what I'm saying? It takes quite a while to get that data out of the telcos. They don't just somehow open the doors. Okay, so another question?
Yes, one more question from Iradukunda Espua. He or she is saying, there's a question related to the first tools you shared. To which extent are they trustworthy? What do they protect in practice?
Yeah, this is a brilliant question. As I try and tell people, everything on the internet, because of how the internet works, can be broken. I'm going to show you things right at the end of this presentation, which I want to get to. I really want us to see it so that you as thinking journalists know that there are other options, but it involves some ethics. So none of them are truly can be truly protected. And I know people out there are kind of shaking their head saying, no, it is. I'm telling you right now, it's not. Okay. So if the NSO group can break into your WhatsApp account without Facebook's permission, which is what happened, think about what can happen. And remember, Facebook, Instagram, and these accounts are run through servers that are offline. They're not linked to, supposedly, they can't be hacked themselves. Despite that, if you're clever enough, and if you've got the state behind you, you can then blow up Iran's nuclear system, which is what happened a few years ago with something called the Stuxnet. If you're clever enough and got enough money, you can put a prostitute into a room with one of the Russian scientists, which is what happened, and you can load, using a flash stick into the computer, the virus that then caused a centrifuge to run at about 10 times its speed it's supposed to, and then it disintegrated. So that was the Americans and Israelis, it's believed, blew up an Iranian's nuclear capacity at the time. If you can do that, breaking into someone's TikTok account because it's run through a Chinese server is like simple. Getting into a Dropbox device that's protected with encryption, simple. Stealing your machine and hacking the encrypted file out of it, simple for these folks. So all of these online things, they protect us at certain levels. You can see that. So if I'm going to be doing stories and I don't want anyone else to find it who just someone steals my computer, yes, you encrypt the files. That's fine. But if you're doing stuff talking about nation states selling arms to each other, or really dangerous international criminals who've got billions of dollars to spend, you're not safe. And if you're dealing with nation states as a whole, forget it. Get off devices when you're doing stuff that could take them down, because they're going to find you. So this is why the nuclear option is very important for us. The 2 nuclear phones, you've got to start thinking about creating social media feeds that it's not you, it looks like you. If you're serious about this, this is not for everyone, all the journalists listening into this. It's for people who are doing high-level stuff. I work with a Chinese journalist at times, met her last year, and she is trying to break the pangolin trade in West Africa and into Hong Kong and into China itself. There's no pictures of her at all. No pictures exist of her. Okay, it starts from there. So you can imagine that level of protection, self-protection, through to, oh, well, I'm doing a story about some thug down the road who's a drug dealer, and then you take kind of slightly less dramatic protection. So you can disappear, which is the thing. It's called the nuclear option. So if you're going to go into a situation where you are being hacked and attacked, you can rebuild your entire accounts. The problem is they start from when you start. You can't backdate them, but you can cleanse your internet. So it's a disappearing process. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. It's about a 7-stage process where you it takes about a month and then you disappear. Another way that you can check how important you are to bad people is you can do your own Twitter audit, for example. Now, this is a simple thing, but I've been working with an agency, for example, that has about 10% of its hundreds of thousands of followers are bots. Right? That's a big problem. It means someone's targeting you for something. And the more serious you are about human rights and about climate and about issues that are nation state involved, the more you're going to get that kind of thing. So Twitter audit is an easy place to start. When I go to organizations and I look at their Twitter feed and I try and do an audit on it, and you can see I've only got, out of 600 followers, only 12 fake, which is a pathetically small number, which means that I'm not really taken seriously by these nation states, which is a very good situation to be in if you're going to get involved in things. The other one is the amnesic, yes, it exists, amnesic incognito live system, which is, it goes back about 4 years. Involves something called Tor. It's linked to the Tor browser, which I'm sure you've all heard about. What you may not know about it is if you see that you're going to get this file, that black slide at the bottom of DIRNXXDRAY. What this is a reference tool. If you figure out how to use the amnesiac incognito live system, you can actually go and explore using, and this is just a register, this little black file .onion is a register of important places to go to. So that's a little bit of a heads up for those who want to delve quite deeply into this world. Linked to that is the Tor browser, which most journalists are aware of now who are in investigations. Yes, it is on a secure device, but it can be intercepted. So your communication, if you're going to go and use your phone to use a Tor browser or your MacBook or whatever it is, that is a Wi-Fi signal that goes to a telco. And inside the telco, sitting there in a big desk, is a member of the establishment watching you. Okay, so yes, part of it you can encrypt, part of it you can move into the browser and it's not hackable and so on. But if they try hard enough and you are dangerous enough, they will find it. Then there's the obvious stuff like your personal protection, Ghostery. If you don't know about Ghostery, you can go and search and install it. What that's really good at doing is stopping trackers. And although at the moment Firefox has got a problem with it, and there's AdBlock Price, which was generic and publishers hated. And then there's Tor privacy and DuckDuckGo privacy browser I've got, which tells you if you're being bad with your privacy. Then there's the privacy tracker that you can run, and all these files you get, you can just go and run them yourself. It takes a few seconds to download, and you can figure out what is your browser doing and how can you protect yourself. Now, the big problem here is that every single browser has what's known as a fingerprint, and it's not a cookie. It's like a cookie, and this tells people. So, for example, right now, Facebook will get this and will know where I'm living, what time it is, what I'm doing on it, what system I'm using, including the kind of font. It tells if cookies are running. And it'll also give this number here. It says auto context fingerprint. It'll give this long list, the multi-numeric number here, which is my browser. No one else's, my browser. So the IP addressing thing, where the IP addresses change and we're sharing them, all that flies out the window with this stuff. So you can run something called the Privacy Badger, which protects you and catches sneaky trackers. And then to end off the session, I just want to quickly touch on something called the darkness and the edge of WebTown, which is how you create an entire false identity. Now, this obviously is what people are using to track you and I. In other words, this is a bad place. But like the old story, you sometimes have to use the tools of the bad people to get the bad people. So if I was being attacked repeatedly, I'd create a false identity for myself using this system. And that becomes a problem if it becomes generally known. So this is very confidential. So if you need to disappear from the web and then create an entire false system and then investigate someone, hey, it's like putting on a wig, isn't it? That's how it works for in our world investigations. The link to that, advanced methods. Okay, so this is the third part of the three-part thing that we looked at. The first is the fact that internationally surveillance in nation states. The second part is how I can do stuff and click and download and protect. And the third part is use your brain, hiding in plain sight. If you're going to go to China and you have no social media account, they're going to think of you as an extremely suspicious individual. All nation states expect people who are not drug dealers or arms dealers to have an identity. All right. So what you do is you build a false identity. And this is hard because your friends love following you on Facebook. So you've got to make choices here. And the more serious you get in this world and in the future you're going to see, the more seriously we investigate things, the more you're going to want to hide in plain sight, but in a way, create false smoke screens. Really important thing to do. And that's pretty much an old school thing. So, I mean, it goes as far as to establish a distinct visual feature. I wear a suit all the time, or do I? People don't recognize me when I'm not in a suit. Funny that. You display a distinct feature with extreme consistency. So you're always, you're proud of your ears, so, and you've got big ears, so, and you show them off. So people think of you as like a Mlungu white guy with big ears. The next minute you put on a wig and you completely disappear because people are used to that feature. You remove the feature when you don't want to be recognized. Long hair, short hair. You use trusted allies. And this is a really big one that's being used a lot at the moment. So I give someone, if you're going to go this far, and you may in some future date, it's stuff like giving a friend your credit card and then they use it somewhere and it's not there. Or you give your phone to someone and you say, travel to Cape Town. Meanwhile, you're still in Joburg. And you see how hiding in plain sight involves quite advanced surveillance methodology. And this is where it ges close to the ethics, because a lot of what I'm telling you here is what the police use or the FBI use. And intelligence units around the world use these tricks. So you've got to use the tricks of the system because the system at times will use a camera to find you if you're going to investigate the Uyghurs, unless you suddenly are a woman and you're actually a man, and you're a very pretty woman maybe, and you change your gender and you use someone else's phone or a burner phone to get onto the bus, and people leave you alone because you look very old. You get the picture there. So cash is king, burner phone, no internet, use face-to-face, take the chip that does networking out of your computer if you can. This is extreme stuff. Don't use flash drives. Yes, Tor, when you run Tor browsers, you have to use a flash drive, but then someone gets your flash drive and they get your password and they get you and they taught you, you can see the message I'm giving you here. Develop memory tricks to memorize things, old stuff. You create a safe zone. When I was doing investigations over the years, I'd have a safety deposit box and I'd give the key to different people and say, if I die, open the safety deposit box, and it's probably those people who did it. You create a confusing identity. And this is the thing I wanted to mention. This is the thing that sounds kind of wild, but what I do on social media, for example, is I follow a lot of people and things that I don't believe in. So the algorithm is completely confused. Facebook doesn't know what to do with me. 1 minute I'm supporting Proud Boys, it thinks. Then I'm supporting the EFF or Antifa. I'm liking. That confuses the hell out of algorithms because not many people do that. Everyone follows the silos of their thinking, their identity, and they they have a crusading ethos or some kind of advocacy for gender or for LGBTI, whatever it is, and then they create an identity that's always the same. The digital system is very happy with you. They know what box to put you in. But when you screw with that algorithm and you change the identity around all the time, particularly about male, female, and left, right, race, and so on, that blows the algorithm completely out of the water. So you can start with those kind of extreme methods if you like right now. See, try it for a while and see what happens to your Facebook advertising. If you switch on advertising on Facebook, do this for a week, watch what happens to the algorithm. It does not know what to do with you. You delete all material that features editorializing. Get rid of your commentary. And the younger you are, the more you comment. The older you get, the less you want to, unless you become really bitter and twisted, you need to get off editorializing because that's a red flag. I do it at times for a reason. I believe I'm involved with something called shaking the tree. So you shake the tree and see what falls out. But that's a particular technique. Most of us need to stop editorializing, get our social media cleaned up, start following contradictions, like people you don't like, follow people you don't like, sow confusion by commenting on sites you usually avoid, never comment in real time about your location. Okay, so I repeat a couple of other things there. Then there's a note or two about the messaging systems, which you've all heard about, Signal, Telegram. Signal is better because Telegram has a server in Russia, and there's some confusion about what they're actually doing. But they are, people who run Telegram will argue and I have had many arguments with people about this. Take your check, but don't do what you've been doing. So the deep web is what you need to look at, and that was the Tor links I gave you earlier. The repeat on what you need to do with the fact that I started and I'm ending with the same thing. The 6-digit password, there's 1 million passwords available. A hacker now in this session, let's say from a nation state that doesn't like being spoken about in this way, could have hacked us already and is recording this conversation, which is supposed to be closed because it takes about 90 seconds to run enough data on the back end of a process to hack the password to log into this. So the answer is use a much more secure system such as MT. It's supposed to be MSN Teams, Cisco WebEx, and so on. So guys, that's it. I know it's a lot of things to take in, but the way it works is that I'm trying to motivate you to look at this PDF that you're going to get, and I promise you it's not packed with spam and malware. And have a look at it and then decide, okay, I'm going to start here. But the big thing that we're trying to get across with this is that we cannot live like we lived 10 years ago. Yes, the internet is a revolution. Yes, the poor have a voice. Yes, all that stuff. Now, because of our freedoms, the responsibility comes as journalists to protect our sources first. And sometimes we're exposing these sources by just being lazy. Okay, well, thank you very much for listening in. I'm going to share this presentation plus a little handbook from a place called hackers.com, who sound bad, but actually quite good folks. And I get newsletters that are not infected from them, as far as I know. And also will outline some of the really interesting ways in which you individually can deal with these things. What I'm trying to do is this is not a paranoid session. This is the thing about power. Your knowledge is your power. Know that this is going on. Know that you cannot continue doing what you've been doing because it's easy. Everything that is worth doing is hard. So you're going to have to, if you're going to go and do ivory trade investigations, you're going to have to create some kind of smokescreen for yourself. Don't make the mistake of deleting your entire digital, as that nuclear option showed. But what that is a red flag. You need to have identity. You need to be identified, but create a false identity. It's like the old days. Put on a wig, moustache, put on like white shoes and look like an old man or an old woman online. Your friends won't recognize you, but then you talk to them off in a different way with a closed Twitter system, or you have a closed Facebook system. You shut down all your public accounts and so on. Your sources will still find you. Okay. Well, thanks very much, everyone. Look forward to any comments. And if you want to get in touch with me, I'm going to just type my email address inside the general account there. It's my full name at gmail.com. And please feel free to send me stuff. Over these sessions, I'm actually helping a couple of people with some of their own being bullied online and stuff when we're dealing with that. One of the things that I do is I track people down who bully other people, and then I take action. Okay, so if you need help with any of these things or you have thoughts, please feel free.